present Maxigas. I'm very happy to have him here. I will not say too much, of course, we should start immediately. Maxigas was the editor of the latest issue of Journal of Peer Production, which you find on the internet, everything on the public domain. But if you would like to, there is also his article and other interesting articles in this paper, which contains, it's not the same that is published on the internet, but contains articles from presenters at this track. So it's a special FSCONS issue, and all of them you can also find on the internet, but if you would choose to have it in paper, it will cost you exactly what it cost me to print it, which is 50 kronor a copy. Go, Maxigas.
Great. So we are 10 minutes late, but it's not a problem because we will talk about time machines today. But this will gradually become
Please use the microphone.
more and more clear.
Please use the microphone.
Should use the mic. It's good?
Yeah.
Okay. So I never gave this talk, so maybe it will be a bit chaotic. I was trying to look into the literature on hackers in sociology, and usually it is written that they are developing new technologies and adopting new technologies, and they are at the forefront and pushing the limits of technology. So I thought maybe this is not the whole truth. So I was trying to look for the opposite inside the hacker scene, where hackers are pushing the limits of technology backwards. So I'm trying to present some examples and some analysis about it. So the subtitle is Hackers Against Technology. This is the disclaimer. So I was looking for counterintuitive examples in the hacker scene that can tell us some interesting things about resistance, technology and politics. So I'm not trying to make general conclusions about the whole hacker scene or that all hackers are doing these things. So there are many examples of practical critique of technology. One of the most famous is the Luddites, that I will describe in a bit more detail soon. The other one, more peaceful group and more sustainable group, is the Amish. These are, I don't know, do you know the Amish? Like, it's a known concept? No?
Yes.
So I will not explain them, but if you don't know the Unabomber, you should definitely look him up on the internet. He was sending bombs to famous people in the technology business, and he wrote a beautiful manifesto, which begins with the sentence that the industrial civilization had a disastrous consequence for the human race. So you can imagine the next sentences. So hackers are not only early adopters, hackers are also refusing, sometimes desperately and sometimes with a lot of suffering, the new technologies that are coming. So why the Luddites are interesting in this context? Of course, anybody who is refusing technologies is nowadays called Luddite. So it's interesting to look at who were these people actually. So they are famous for breaking frames and for being persecuted for this. So a frame was used for making textile. They were textile workers. So the frames were the new technologies that were introduced to make factories and to make textile in the factories. So this happened exactly in the beginning of industrial capitalism, where there was a cottage industry, which meant that people had a subsistence living. They were having their own small farm, and working in the textile industry was one part of their life. And it was part of the family activities. And the idea was to make factories, to make them wage workers, and to move them to urban areas, to the cities. Because of this, they were at least outside of this wave of capitalism that emerged at that time. So I argue that they had a privileged position to see the relationship between politics, the changing ways of life, and the technology that was coming. Despite all this, they were not against all technologies. They were against these particular automatic frames that were introduced to be able to to offer them a completely different life. So what they saw in this particular technology was that it has bad social effects. It corresponded to social decline instead of social progress. So I think this is quite important, and it sounds very easy to say, but basically it goes against some of the foundational myths of modernity, of the whole area that we are living in. So the idea is always that there is a technological progress, and when you have a new technology, your life or social life will be better. And I think that this is a questionable claim. So hackers are sometimes championing the old school, the Linux philosophy, refusing system D, for example. I think that this is the most theoretical and maybe the most substantial part that I want to say, like why hackers can be in this position to refuse technologies. And I claim that there are 3 characteristics of the hacker scene which cannot be found in other places. And this is the 3 characteristics that together enable them to reflect critically on technology. So I'm kind of trying to ask here, how is it possible at all to have a critical view of technology? And the first is, of course, that they know how technology works, so they can read technology. They have the engineering expertise to take a technology, understand how it works and what it does. The second is that they have a semi-autonomous culture. This is often treated under the rubric of the hacker ethics, the hacker culture. Stephen Levy has a book from 1984, The Heroes of the Computer Revolution, which I think it's one of the books that you can read and you can follow the references, and it really describes the story of the hacker scene, starting from the MIT Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, then the Homebrew Computer Club, and the freakers who were hacking on phone networks. So the third is historical perspective. I have a job researching hackerspaces, so I'm visiting a lot of hackerspaces, and I noticed that in the hackerspaces, a lot of our technology is ending up. And for example, in Arnhem, in Holland, they have a whole old computer museum there, and a lot of hackers really like the old technologies. And I think that this corresponds to the ability to be reflective about the new technologies that come out, simply because they have a basis for comparison. They remember what was an IBM keyboard in the 1980s and how it made a click when you pushed it. And when they see a tablet and this kind of online screen keyboards, they ask, is it progress in technology? Is it making our life better, or is it a more shitty keyboard? So I think this is the 3 necessary conditions for a critical view on technology. For example, just university-trained engineers wouldn't have the autonomous culture to have independent judgment, even if they can understand the technologies perfectly, sometimes better than the hackers. They just don't know how to think independently and believe something else than what the developers of this technology are trying to make them believe. So I will present very briefly 3 examples of how this happens. And I have to say that most of these examples are kind of desperate cases rather than a famous triumph of what kind of amazing things hackers did. It's more like how funny is their stubborn resistance to technological progress and social decline. So it's 3 hacker-only technologies that I call them, because they are not very useful for the normal consumer. One is the N900 mobile phone, which was one of the first ones with a free operating system. And the second is a browser extension, which is blocking third-party requests. I will explain this in a bit more detail later. And the third is a kind of IRC server, which enables you to talk IRC protocol to MSN and Facebook and Twitter and so on. So kind of the logic, I'm trying to make some kind of spectrum here. So in the case of N900, they see that Android is maybe a free software, but it's controlled by Google. So it's a kind of recuperated version of the free software operating system. So I noticed that a lot of people stopped buying mobile phones after 2009 when N900 was not available anymore. And they stayed with this broken system through years, waiting for the enigmatic and mystical free operating system to emerge. And I wrote this article with the very bad conclusions, and I'm very happy to see the Firefox stand downstairs and to have a phone with a free operating system now. So in the second case, this is where we get more close to the Luddites, because hackers are actually breaking websites, breaking web technologies. JavaScript just wouldn't work. Don't even think about watching some Flash movies. This is a very useful extension for the browser that will disable all these technologies. And in case of Beetlebee, you accept that you need an account and all your friends are on ICQ or now in Facebook, but you still want to use the IRC interface to talk to them. So you kind of give in to the crowd, but for your part, in the last line of defense, you want a text-only interface. So this is the N900. It's a really good design of hardware. It has some fatal mistakes, as all good designs. But in general, it has a keyboard with physical keys. You can push it, and then it also has a capacitive screen, so you can also touch it. And I think it's a great piece of hardware. So Nokia came out more or less at the same time as Microsoft, Google, and Apple with a smartphone. So this was one of the first smartphones. It was published in the years when Android came out, when the first iPhone was coming. And Nokia had, what was this Nokia operating system that was really old and... Symbian, it's exactly, yes. So Nokia had Symbian, and they saw that, okay, it's not really up to the time. And they wanted to leverage the power of free software to work against their competitors. And then they were bought by Microsoft, and this story ended very quickly. And since then, of course, this is an ecosystem which is not maintained, so some horrible bugs and some old software are running on these phones. And for example, the USB charger on the phone, the USB host is very weak, so it quite quickly breaks. So there are people, for example, in the Amsterdam Hack Lab, who are buying them off the market and soldering the connector back and giving them free to people to enable them to use a properly free operating system. And yes, users are suffering because of this, but they still keep to their old phones because there is not anything better on the market, or at least at that point there was nothing better on the market. So for example, I remember going home with 2 N900 users and my own phone from the Chaos Communication Congress after the party at 5 o'clock, and we had a map on it, but this map didn't work, and so we couldn't really find home. But we thought at least we failed with free software. So for request policy, I have a little bit of ethnographic description in the article that I'm writing about this now. It's about a group of hackers who sit in the hackerspace around a large table. And one of them is noticing a link on IRC to CNN or to a major news portal. So they click on it, and then this guy says, yeah, have you seen this? This is a very interesting article. I don't know, one of our idols, Assange, said something again. No? And they tried to go to this website. And we would think that hackers are people who are good with computers. No? They are advanced internet users. So it shouldn't be a problem for them to look at a news article in a mainstream news website. But this is not what happens. What happens is that they struggle for 15 minutes. Somebody says, it's just a white page. Another person says, you have to enable JavaScript. And then a third one says, but why I have to enable JavaScript? I want to read a plain text article. Why do you need Ajax to deliver me these 5 paragraphs of text? And then somebody says, yeah, I enable JavaScript. But the HTTPS certificate is horribly broken on this site. I don't even know if Assange said this. Maybe the NSA put something else in the middle. So by the end of the 15 minutes, the interesting part becomes how the HTTPS ecosystem is totally broken. We have to replace it with something else. And what Assange said is kind of forgotten, because hackers are these people who are looking at the technology. For them, the medium is really the message. The message was long forgotten. So I would say that here it is really breaking websites, breaking technologies. Somebody designs a website, and this is the technical term that they use, like, it is broken on this browser. So actually they put a lot of energy into developing this feature, this browser extension that breaks the internet for you. And they think that they are higher class users, enlightened technologists, who are not unlike the masses, look at the broken internet. And for example, blogger.com requires so many third-party requests from other servers than blogger.com that they wouldn't even look at it. It's just so bad that you would boycott it. So I also argue that despite this is supposed to be a privacy and anonymity enhancement technology, so it is supposed to defend you from spying, there is also an element of nostalgia to the 1990s, where we were webmasters. There was a customer, sorry, this is, I don't even know where this phone is. It's this. I have a smartphone, but it's too smart sometimes. So, so I think there is a nostalgia for when we were webmasters, and we designed the CSS, the HTML, and we deployed Apache and Debian on the server, and we did everything ourselves. And nowadays, you go to a company and they have front-end designers, user experience designers, and then another guy is just doing CSS, and somebody is a site builder, somebody is a back-end developer, somebody is a front-end developer. So this cottage industry where you were kind of living your life, and in the meantime, sometimes putting together a website, became this differentiated industry where everybody is in a little slot, kind of in a conveyor belt. You do this, you give it to the next guy, he does that, and everybody just knows one technology. Maybe it's the revival of the Unix philosophy. Everybody does one thing, but does it well, and then the employer combines them. So BitLB, I don't know if I'm running out of time, not so much. Okay, so BitLB is a wonderful piece of software. If you ever wanted to have Twitter in Emacs, it's for you. It's the only buzzword that your manager doesn't know about. So it presents you with a modern interface to all the latest technologies. It is basically it is trying to keep IRC alive. And I think that this is a historical and political mission that we have to take very seriously. So IRC is the original social media. It is the original social network. It federates. It is run by communities. There are no advertisements. Big companies are running it for free, for the benefit of the community, without doing any data mining, without selling the advertisement data. It's the perfect network. Why? Since the beginning, the IRC was created, I think, in 1977. Somebody can look it up on Wikipedia while I speak, maybe. And since then, there was ICQ, MSN, Skype, Gtalk, Twitter, Facebook. I forgot something very important, but I don't know what was it. I wanted to put some more things here. But there were all these generations of technologies which tried to implement this thing that you write something and it appears on the other computer. And ICQ was already there, it worked, it did what we needed. So most people didn't really migrate to these other technologies. It was only the masses who did that. Why IRC never got popular? Because you would think that if the technology is so good, then it must become popular, no? Because if you have the superior technology, advertisement doesn't matter. This is the key to the success of Linux. If the algorithm is correct, it will have the market share. So it is. I claim, but I'm not sure. If you have any ideas, please tell me. I think that IRC never got popular because you can connect to an IRC channel, but you don't get the backlog. So when you are not connected, you are not part of the conversation. If somebody sends you a Skype message, next time you connect to Skype, you will get it. So I think that this was the one feature that was really missing from IRC. The problem with IRC, that everybody who was developing IRC, of course, had a shell server. You're not a user if you don't have a shell server. So the people who had a stake in the development of this technology already had access to computers, to shells. They ran a screen, so their IRC client was always running. They were always on IRC, and sometimes they checked what is going on there. And they never really understood why not everybody uses IRC, and they never really enabled these people to use IRC either. Therefore, IRC became a place, kind of social media, where there are only technically capable people. And I think this ghetto is somehow valuable. And we have to say that IRC is not just an old boys thing. Like hackerspaces didn't exist in 1977, the anonymous hacker group didn't exist in 1977, and every hackerspace, like the one in Göteborg, have an IRC channel. This is where they live their social life. And Anonymous is doing their good and bad things on IRC too. So Beetleby makes everything look like IRC. It acts like an IRC channel, but the problem is that you still need to register your Skype account, you need to still to register your Twitter account, so in effect you are on these networks. It doesn't look like to you that you're on these networks. So it's the same thing, but less disgusting. So why I call all these technologies time machines? Time machines. Time machines. Time machines that you can build. This morning we found Stargate outside, so pay attention. You have to find the button to activate it.
The Wikispeed time machine.
So first of all, the problem with the Luddite approach to technologies in our technologically advanced age is that when we want to break one machine, we have to build some more machines that break them. So it becomes like the robots against robots scenario. For example, request policy is a very sophisticated project. It's in active development. And people work a lot to prevent you from meeting web technologies from the 2000s. So it takes energy, it takes expertise. It's an engineering achievement to fight against technology today. So why I call them time machines? Because basically they take you back to time, to the moment when things went wrong. No? We know this scenario. We have to go back and change the course of history. There was a guy, we tell them about it, and everything will be different. So we start another future. The only problem is that it's not free to do these things. We don't just magically get these time machines. We have to build them. So it's also, yes, it's a concrete work. And this is the work which needs some political commitments to do. So where is political agency coming from? Why this is politically enabling? So I don't want to say that every technology that is new is necessarily bad, or using just all technologies is good. I think the agency comes from having a time machine. So being able to say when something new comes, is this what I wanted? Did some things go wrong somewhere? And being able, which means that being able to develop the technologies to go back to the point where things went wrong and try to continue from there. And I think in particular, for example, let's say the N900 is a kind of good example of this. That at least a certain number of people refuse to buy new phones. They refuse, these are technically capable people, so they are potential developers. And the Android ecosystem, iPhone ecosystem is built on independent developers, app developers making new apps, and then they can say they have 1 million apps. So these people refuse to participate as developers also in these markets, also as consumers. And after some time, a lot of people started to think that there is a possible market share of these freakies. They are a particular market segment, let's make an open source phone for them. And by now we have an open source phone. So I think that this refusal of some technologies is also technologically prolific. It is inspiring the development of new technologies. Even if for 4 years you have to use a broken phone. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. We have 10 minutes for questions.
There was a question. The free phone, is that the Firefox phone that
The free phone
the free phone with
is
free operating system?
yes, so free operating system for phones. There is Firefox, which is a real thing. There is Ubuntu, which, as far as I know, it's so far vaporware, but people say it's gonna work. There is Sailfish OS that you can also already buy if you have a lot of money. It's called the Jola phone. What else is there?
The N900.
There is, yeah, there is
OS.
still the N900. You can buy it. It's still a good phone. It's a bit broken, but it's good.
I think
they're
making
making
like cover.
Yeah, they're making
So there
a
is
Neo
there is a
900.
Neo 900 project, which tries to develop a new board, which you can fit inside the old case of the N900. So it will not fix the broken USB connector
Yeah.
for you, but it will update your, it will fix the
They are
broken
actually
USB
working with
connector.
the OS.
Great.
So they're recoding everything, rebuilding a lot of it.
So yeah, the now 900 I think is the most promising
And
thing.
you come with the keyboard.
There are, it will come exactly, it will look exactly as the N900, but with an upgraded hardware.
Oh.
And you can run the contemporary free phone operating systems on it as well. So there it is also a movement into hardware. There is also Fairphone, which is a bit different project, which is running a commercial Android, but the supply line is changed, so it is reproducing a different set of social relations. They claim that it's not slaves who mine the silicium that is in the phone, and so on and so forth. And this is already a project that is producing phones for the market, and you can order it and get it.
Maybe run Ubuntu on it.
Pardon?
Maybe install Ubuntu.
I don't know if you know.
There's also replicant. So that doesn't work on a lot of phones, it works on some phones. It's a free, it's basically a GNU Android. Well, not completely, that's
Yeah.
a bit of an overversion.
Fairphone, by the way?
I don't know. I know it works pretty well on the Galaxy Notes and S2s.
If you want to know more about the Firefox phone, we have some at the Mozilla booth. You're welcome to.
Okay, if you don't have any more questions, then I will go and smoke a cigarette before.
I have a small question. You said that there was lots of bugs, but if it's through software, why didn't they get fixed? So is it hardware problems or?
No, it's just too few people who
Ah, okay.
are doing it.
Okay.
Like it was like the whole idea was that there will be Nokia behind it, and so they developed a lot of things without really sharpening them. And when Nokia dropped out, also a lot of people got less enthusiastic because basically it's not a viable platform. So at least in the 3 years after Microsoft bought Nokia, it looked like that even if you work a lot and develop this thing, it's never gonna work. Like, yeah, the history is against you.
But the Neo project is working with that, I think.
I think that on the Neo you will be able to run a selection of operating systems, including the original online
Yeah,
language.
what's it called actually?
Mimo, and now it's
It became Mimo.
something else.
Neo.
Then it became Migo, and then it became something else.
Yeah, okay. I don't think you can understand it in a conference. It's a very complicated family tree. What happened after Mimo? Yeah, it's like forking upon forks upon forks upon forks upon forks, and it's forks all the way down. Okay, so let's make 2015
for
No!